I paid their mortgage, managed their retirement, and cleaned up their financial messes for a decade. Then I heard them laugh and say they wished I didn't exist. So I walked out, cut off the funds, and waited for their world to crumble. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. I shouldn't have been home. That was the first deviation from the routine, the tiny crack in the universe that allowed the truth to slip through. Usually at 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, I would be buried under a mountain of spreadsheets in my office downtown, tracking hidden assets for a high-stakes divorce case or analyzing fraudulent tax returns. I was a forensic accountant. My entire life was built on finding the things people tried desperately to hide. I was good at it. I was precise, invisible, and essential. But today, the migraine had started behind my left eye around noon, a sharp, rhythmic stabbing that made the numbers on my screen swim and blur. By 1:00 p.m., I was nauseous. By 2:00 p.m., my boss took one look at my gray complexion and ordered me to go home. "Go, Grace," she had said, her voice softening. "The fraud will still be there tomorrow. Go sleep it off." So I drove home to the house I technically shared with my parents, though shared was a generous term. It was their house on the deed, but it was my money that had paid for the new roof, the HVAC system, and the landscaping. It was my salary that covered the property taxes and the grocery bills. I had moved back in 3 years ago to help them get back on their feet after Dad's bad investment, and somehow I had never left. I had become the load-bearing wall of their lives, essential, supporting everything, and completely ignored. I parked my car down the street because the driveway was full. Ryan's truck was there. My brother, the golden boy. Seeing his truck meant he wasn't at his job, a vague consulting gig that never seemed to pay him, but I was too throbbing with pain to care. I just wanted to get to my room, close the blackout curtains, and cease to exist for a few hours. I unlocked the front door silently. That was a habit born of years of trying not to disturb them, trying not to take up space. The house was cool and smelled of coffee and something sweet, like cinnamon rolls. I kicked off my heels in the foyer, wincing as the clatter of one shoe hitting the floor sounded like a gunshot in my sensitive ears. I paused, waiting to see if anyone called out. Silence. They must be in the kitchen or the backyard. I crept down the hallway, clutching my purse against my stomach, just wanting to bypass the common areas and retreat upstairs. But as I reached the spot where the hallway turned toward the kitchen, I heard them. "It's just ridiculous, Alan," my mother, Brenda, said. Her voice was clear, carrying that specific tone of indulgent exasperation she reserved for talking about Ryan. "He needs the capital. If he doesn't get the investment now, the opportunity closes." I know, my father, Alan, replied. I could hear the clink of a spoon against a ceramic mug. "But Grace handles the liquidity. You know how she is. If we ask for $5,000 for Ryan's project, she's going to want a business plan, a spreadsheet, a breakdown. She sucks the joy out of everything." I froze. The pain behind my eye throbbed, sinking with the sudden hammer of my heart. I shouldn't listen. I should announce myself. But my feet felt leaden, rooted to the hardwood. "She's just stiff," Mom sighed. "So rigid. Ryan has vision. Ryan has spirit. Grace acts like she's the auditor of our lives. It's exhausting living with someone who counts every penny, even if it is technically her money." "Technically," Dad scoffed. "We raised her. We put a roof over her head. We're a family. The money is family money. She just hoards it because she has nothing else. No boyfriend, no social life, no hobbies, just her little spreadsheets." "It's sad, really," Mom said, though she didn't sound sad. She sounded annoyed. "Ryan is going to take us to Italy when this business takes off. Grace will probably calculate the tax implications of a gelato before let us eat one." They laughed. It wasn't a mean cackle. It was a warm, comfortable, shared chuckle between husband and wife, a sound of unity, a sound that excluded me entirely. I leaned my head against the cool wall, the migraine flaring so violently I had to close my eyes. I expected the conversation to move on. I expected them to talk about dinner or the weather. But Dad spoke again, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more contemplative. "You know," he said, and I I'd hear the smile in his voice. Looking at how Ryan turned out, so full of life, so charismatic, and then looking at Grace, sometimes I wonder. "Wonder what?" Mom asked. "Sometimes I wish Ryan was our only child," Dad said. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "It would be so much simpler. Just us and him, we wouldn't have this dark cloud hovering over the house, judging us. We could just be happy." I stopped breathing. The air in my lungs turned to stone. "I know what you mean," Mom agreed instantly. There was zero hesitation, no defense of her daughter. No, "Oh, don't say that, Alan," just agreement. "Ryan is the joy, Grace is the obligation." It sounds terrible to say, but sometimes I feel like we're stuck with a roommate we don't like, rather than a daughter. "Exactly," Dad said. "A roommate who pays the bills, sure, but at what cost to our peace of mind?" They laughed again, louder this time. I stood in the hallway. I checked my watch. 1 minute passed. Then 2. My head was splitting open, but the physical pain was suddenly distant, muted by a cold, numbing shock that started in my fingertips and raced up my arms. 3 minutes. I stood there for 3 full minutes, listening to the clatter of cups, the scrape of chairs, the comfortable murmur of the parents who had raised me wishing I had never been born. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a vase. I turned around, I picked up my shoes, and I walked back out the door. The betrayal wasn't just in the words, it was in the laughter. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was the realization that my existence was their burden. I sat in my car 3 blocks away, gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked under my fingernails. My vision was tunneling, the edges of the world turning gray, but my mind was crystal clear. It was a terrifying clarity, cold and sharp, like the blade of a knife. Ryan is the joy, Grace is the obligation. The sentence replayed in my mind on an endless loop. I looked at the house down the street, the house I had just painted last summer, the house where I paid the landscaping crew to come every Thursday so Dad wouldn't hurt his back. It looked the same as it had 10 minutes ago, but to me, it looked like a stage set for a play I had been fired from. I needed to vomit. I opened the car door and dry heaved onto the pavement, the physical reaction to the shock finally catching up with me. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and checked my phone. 2:48 p.m. They didn't know I was home. They didn't know I had heard. If I went back in there now, what would happen? I would scream, I would cry, I would demand an explanation. And they would gaslight me. I knew it as surely as I knew the tax code. Mom would say I was being dramatic. Dad would say I misunderstood, that it was a joke, that I was too sensitive, proving exactly what they had just said about me being a dark cloud. No. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of my tears. Not today. I put the car in gear and drove to the nearest hotel, a generic chain by the highway. I checked in, used my corporate credit card, and collapsed onto the stiff bed. I lay there for 4 hours in the dark, the migraine slowly receding as the adrenaline of survival took over. By 7:00 p.m., I was sitting up, staring at the wall. I wasn't sad anymore. I was calculating. I was a forensic accountant. My job was to look at a chaotic mess of numbers and find the truth hidden underneath. I looked at the chaotic mess of my family dynamic and saw the truth clearly for the first time. They didn't love me. They loved my utility. They loved the safety net I provided so they could indulge their golden boy. I stood up and paced the small hotel room. I needed a plan. I couldn't just disappear forever without my things, but I couldn't go back and live there. I waited until 2:00 a.m. I drove back to the house. The windows were dark. Ryan's truck was gone, likely out at a bar spending money he didn't have. Mom and Dad would be asleep. Dad took a sleeping pill every night at 10:00 p.m., a prescription I picked up and paid for. I let myself in. The house was silent. It felt like a museum of a life I used to live. I moved like a ghost, keeping my shoes off, stepping on the parts of the floorboards I knew didn't creak. I went to my room and grabbed 2 large suitcases. I didn't pack everything. I packed the essentials: my clothes, my laptop, my external hard drives, my passport, my birth certificate, and the small box of jewelry my grandmother had left me, the only person in this family who had ever looked at me with genuine delight. I left the furniture. I left the books. I left the decorations. I stripped the bed so it looked like I had done laundry, leaving the mattress bare. I went downstairs to the office I shared with Dad. This was the dangerous part. I sat at the desk and booted up the family computer. I didn't need to hack anything. I had set up all the passwords. I logged into the bank accounts. Checking, savings, investment portfolio. I stared at the balances. For years, I had linked my personal accounts to theirs to facilitate easy transfers. I paid the mortgage directly. I paid the utilities directly. I transferred an allowance into the joint account for groceries. I opened a new browser tab and logged into my own bank. Unlink. 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 I systematically removed my authorization from every single bill: the electric company, the water, the internet, the landscaper, the pool maintenance, the streaming services. Then I looked at the joint account. There was $4,500 in there. $3,000 of it was money I had transferred 3 days ago to cover the property tax bill due next week. I hesitated. Taking the money back felt petty. It felt like theft, even though it was my money. Then I heard Dad's voice in my head. Sometimes I wish Ryan was our only child. If Ryan was their only child, Ryan could pay the property taxes. I initiated a transfer of $3,000 back to my personal account. I left them with $1,500, their actual pension money. I wasn't a thief. I was just resigning. I wiped the browser history. I shut down the computer. As I walked to the front door with my suitcases, I paused at the kitchen counter. There was a note from Mom on the fridge, written on the whiteboard in her looping script. "Ryan, don't forget family dinner Sunday, making your favorite roast." There was no note for me. I walked out the door, locking it behind me. I tossed the key under the mat, a final, symbolic resignation. I sat in my car, the engine idling in the cool night air. I watched the dark windows of the house where I had spent 27 years trying to earn love that was never for sale. They thought I was boring. They thought I was a dark cloud. They thought I was nothing more than a checkbook with a pulse. I put the car in drive. As I pulled away, a cold smile touched my lips. They wanted to live in a world where I didn't exist. Fine, I would grant their wish. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't just the one who paid the bills. I was the one who kept the wolves at the door, and I had just unlocked the gate. To understand why walking out that door felt like cutting off my own limb, you have to understand the ecosystem of my family. I was the fixer. It started when I was 10. I was the one who remembered where Dad put his keys. I was the one who reminded Mom about dentist appointments. By 16, I was balancing their checkbook because Dad didn't have the head for math and Mom didn't want the stress. I went to college on a full scholarship because I knew they had saved nothing. I became a CPA, then a forensic accountant because I craved order. I craved a world where things balanced, where inputs equaled outputs. My family was the one equation I couldn't solve. Ryan was 3 years older than me. He was charming, handsome, and utterly useless. He had dropped out of college twice. He had started a clothing brand that failed, a tech startup that never had a product, and was currently a crypto consultant, which, as far as I could tell, meant he scrolled Twitter all day and asked Mom for gas money. But to Alan and Brenda, Ryan was a visionary who just hadn't found his footing yet. They treated him like a fragile genius. Every failure was the world's fault, never his. And me, I was the infrastructure. When Dad made a bad investment in a timeshare in 2018, I spent 6 months fighting the contract to get his money back. When Mom got rear-ended and the insurance company tried to lowball her, I wrote the letters that got her a 5-figure settlement. I moved back in 3 years ago because Dad had a minor heart scare and they were drowning in credit card debt, mostly from bailing Ryan out of a gambling mishap. I took over everything. I refinanced the house. I consolidated the debt. I put them on a strict budget, which they hated, but followed because I was subsidizing the difference. I paid $2,200 a month toward their mortgage and bills. I bought the groceries. I paid for the vacations they took, vacations where they invited Ryan and forgot to ask if I could get time off work. I sat in my new apartment, a sterile, furnished corporate rental I had secured the morning after I left, and thought about the conversation in the kitchen. Grace sucks the joy out of everything. I sucked the joy out because I was the only one pointing out that you can't spend money you don't have. I was the buzzkill who said no to the new boat because the roof was leaking. My phone had been silent for 3 days. That was the hardest part. I had been gone for 3 days and they hadn't called. They assumed I was just at work or maybe staying at a friend's, though they knew I didn't really have close friends because I spent all my free time managing their lives. On the 4th day, my phone finally buzzed. It was Mom. Mom, hey honey, are you working late again? Dad can't find the password for the Netflix account. I stared at the text. No, where are you? No, we haven't seen you in days. Just a tech support request. I didn't reply. 2 hours later. Mom, Grace, serious question. The TV isn't working. Did you change something? Ryan wants to watch a documentary for his research. Research, I snorted. I blocked her number, then I blocked Dad's, then I blocked Ryan's. It felt petty, it felt immature, but it also felt like the first breath of fresh air I had taken in years. I decided to dig deeper. If I was going to be the villain of their story, I might as well have all the facts. I opened my laptop and pulled up the forensic tools I used for work. Since I was still technically a co-signer on one of Dad's old credit cards, one I thought I had closed, but clearly hadn't, I could legally access the statement history. I started tracing the expenses from the last 6 months, the things I had missed because I was too busy looking at the macro budget. I saw withdrawals at ATMs near casinos at 2:00 a.m. I saw consulting fees paid via Venmo to a user named Ryan King 88. I saw a charge for a luxury jewelry store last month, $1,200. I frowned. Mom's birthday wasn't last month. Neither was Dad's. I dug further. I cross-referenced the jewelry store receipt, which was digitized in the bank's rewards portal with Ryan's social media. And there it was, a post from 3 weeks ago. Ryan, smiling with his arm around a girl I had never seen before. A girl wearing a very shiny, very familiar-looking necklace. Ryan treating my queen right, entrepreneur life hustle. He bought it with Dad's credit card, the credit card I paid off every month. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. I wasn't just paying their bills. I was funding Ryan's fake lifestyle. I was paying for the props he used to play the successful businessman, while my parents laughed at me for being boring. I looked at the dates. That $1,200 charge, it was made 2 days after I told Dad we couldn't afford to upgrade the water heater yet. Dad had sighed and looked at me like I was a miser. "You're so tight with money, Grace," he had said. He had scolded me for saving money on a water heater, while letting his son steal $1,200 for a necklace. They weren't just favoring him, they were complicit in his theft. I screenshotted everything: the bank statements, the social media posts, the timestamp text messages where I told Dad we were broke that same week. I created a folder on my desktop named The Audit. They wanted to pretend Ryan was the prize and I was the burden. Fine, I would let them live that reality. But first, I had to see how long it would take them to realize the burden had stopped carrying the weight. I checked the calendar. It was October 12th. The property tax bill I had canceled payment on was due October 15th. The mortgage auto draft, which pulled from the joint account I had just emptied, was due October 20th. The electric bill was due November 1st. The clock was ticking, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to stop the countdown. The silence broke exactly 16 days after I walked out the door. It didn't break with a bang, but with a ping. I was sitting in my sterile, beige cubicle at work, reviewing a suspicious ledger for a pharmaceutical client, when my personal email notification slid onto the bottom right of my screen. Subject: action required. Mortgage payment returned insufficient funds. I stared at the notification. A grim, satisfied smirk tugged at the corner of my mouth. It had begun. Because I had unlinked my accounts, the bank had attempted to pull the mortgage from my parents' joint checking account, the one I had left with only $1,500. The mortgage was $2,200. 5 minutes later, ping. Subject: urgent, property tax payment overdue. 10 minutes later, ping. Subject: Netflix, update payment method to continue service. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, taking a sip of lukewarm coffee. It was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. The supports were cut, the charges were blown, and now gravity was doing the rest. I didn't intervene. I didn't forward the emails to Dad. I didn't text Mom to warn her. I simply filed the emails into a folder I had labeled Consequences. But I couldn't just sit and watch the fire burn. I needed to know who had lit the match in the first place. I needed to know exactly how deep Ryan's rot went. The necklace was just the tip of the iceberg. People like Ryan, people who feel entitled to the world without working for it, never stop at petty theft. I closed my work spreadsheets and opened a new browser window. It was time for a different kind of audit. I started with the public records. In our county, business filings are public domain. If Ryan was a consultant, he would need an LLC, a business license, something. I searched his name, Ryan Last. The name. Nothing. I searched the company name he had put on his LinkedIn profile, Prestige Horizons Group. Nothing, no LLC, no incorporation documents. It was a ghost company. I frowned. If he wasn't a legitimate business, where was the investment money Mom and Dad gave him going? I logged back into the forensic database I used for skip tracing, a tool that aggregates public data, social media footprints, and asset locations. It wasn't illegal, just thorough. I plugged in Ryan's email address and his cell phone number. The system churned for a moment, spinning a blue circle before spitting out a list of associated accounts. Most were standard: Instagram, TikTok, a fantasy football league. But then I saw an account on a forum called the High Rollers Lounge. It was a sports betting community. My stomach tightened. I clicked the link. The forum required a login, but the user profile summaries were public. User: King Ryan 88 member since 2022 reputation score. Banned for non-payment. I scrolled through his cached post history. It was a timeline of delusion. January 14th. Just put $5,000 on the Chiefs. Easy money, doubling my capital for a new venture. February 2nd. Bad beat. Need a bridge loan. Anyone know a shark who deals in crypto? March 10th. Hitting up the angel investors lol for another round. They never check the books. Angel investors, Mom and Dad. He wasn't building a business. He was gambling their retirement away, loss after loss, and calling it capital for a startup that didn't exist. I sat there, the fluorescent lights of the office humming above me, feeling a mix of vindication and nausea. They had called me a dark cloud. They had wished I wasn't born so they could just enjoy Ryan. Well, they were enjoying him now. They were enjoying the reality of a son who referred to them as angel investors. He could dupe because they never check the books. I was the one who checked the books, and I was gone. My phone on the desk buzzed. It wasn't a text this time, it was a call. Dad calling. I let it ring. It stopped, then it started again immediately. Dad calling. He called 4 times in a row, then Mom called twice, then Ryan called once. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to speak to them. I needed them to feel the panic first. I needed the lights to actually flicker, the water to run cold, the letters to turn red. I sent a text to the security desk in the lobby of my office building. Me, hi, this is Grace from the 14th floor. If anyone named Alan, Brenda, or Ryan asks for me, I am not in the building. Do not let them up. Security, copy that, Grace. I turned my phone face down. I had the leverage. I had the truth. But I wasn't going to save them, not this time. I was going to let the joy of their lives ruin them, and then, only then, would I show them exactly what they had thrown away. They didn't catch me at the office. They caught me at the one place I couldn't avoid, the pharmacy. It was 3 days later. I needed a refill on my migraine medication. Stress was a trigger, after all, and I had stopped at the 24-hour pharmacy 3 towns over, assuming I was safe. I wasn't. I was walking out of the sliding glass doors, clutching the small white paper bag, when a familiar SUV screeched into the parking spot right in front of the crosswalk, blocking my path. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was Dad's Ford Explorer. The driver's door flew open. Dad stepped out. He looked disheveled. Usually, Alan was a man who prided himself on appearances, polo shirts tucked in, hair combed. Today, his shirt was wrinkled and he had dark circles under his eyes. Mom scrambled out of the passenger side. She looked frantic. Grace, Dad shouted, his voice echoing across the parking lot. What the hell is wrong with you? I stopped. I didn't run. I simply stood there, gripping my medication, and let the cold wind whip my hair across my face. Hello, Alan, Brenda. Don't you Alan me, he snapped, marching toward me. He stopped 3 feet away, invading my personal space. Do you have any idea what's been happening? The mortgage bounced. Bounced, Grace. We got a letter threatening legal action on the taxes. The internet is off. And we've been calling you for days, Mom added, her voice shrill. She reached out as if to grab my arm, but I took a sharp step back. She froze, looking hurt. We were worried sick. We thought you were dead. No, you didn't, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly steady. It sounded like a stranger's voice. You thought your ATM was broken. How dare you, Dad spat, his face flushing red. We are your parents. You don't just disappear. You don't just stop doing your job. My job? I let out a short, dry laugh. I have a job. I'm a forensic accountant. Managing your household was a favor you clearly didn't appreciate. We appreciate you, Mom cried, wringing her hands. But you can't just leave us in the lurch like tea. Ryan is stressed out of his mind. He's trying to launch his business, and this chaos at home is affecting his focus. There it was, Ryan. Ryan's focus, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it now? Is his focus on the business, or is it on the parlay he lost last week? They both froze. Dad blinked, his confusion momentarily overriding his anger. What? The betting, I said, stepping closer to them. The sports betting, the High Rollers Lounge. That's where the capital is going, Dad. It's not going to a startup. It's going to bookies. You're lying, Mom said immediately. It was a reflex. Ryan doesn't gamble. He's an entrepreneur. He's a thief, I said. Did you ask him about the necklace? Mom went pale. What necklace? The diamond pendant he bought last month, I said, locking eyes with her. The one that cost $1,200, the one he bought with Dad's credit card, the card I pay off. He gave it to a girl he met at a bar. I saw the receipt. I saw the Instagram post. He told us that was a networking expense, Dad stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked at Mom, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. He said he had to buy a gift for a potential partner's wife. A partner's wife? I laughed. It was a harsh, jagged sound. He posted a photo of himself with a 20-year-old girl and captioned it, "Treating my queen right." He played you. He's been playing you for years. Stop it, Mom shrieked. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of him because he takes risks and you're just safe. You're trying to ruin his reputation because you're bitter. I'm not bitter, I said. I'm done. I heard you, you know. The parking lot went silent. A car drove past on the main road, the swoosh of tires loud in the quiet. Heard what? Dad asked, his voice dropping. Tuesday, 2 weeks ago. I came home early with a migraine, I said softly. I stood in the hallway. I heard you say you wished Ryan was your only child. I heard you laugh about how boring I am. I heard you call me an obligation. Mom covered her mouth with her hand. Her eyes widened, not with remorse, but with the shock of being caught. Dad looked away, his jaw working. We were just blowing off steam, Dad muttered, refusing to look at me. You know how it is, we didn't mean it literally. You meant it enough to laugh, I said. You got your wish, Dad. Ryan is your only child now. Let him pay the mortgage. Let him fix the tax bill. Let him manage the retirement fund. Grace, be reasonable, Dad stepped forward, his tone shifting from anger to a desperate, bullying command. You can't do this. We don't have the login for the tax portal. We don't know the passwords for the bank transfers. You set all that up. You have to come home and fix it. I don't have to do anything, I said. I turned toward my car. If you walk away, Dad shouted at my back, his voice cracking with desperation, don't expect to be part of this family when Ryan makes it big. When he succeeds, you'll get nothing. I stopped. I opened my car door and looked back at them one last time. They looked small. They looked old. They looked like two people standing on the deck of a sinking ship, screaming at the lifeboats to come back because the captain needed a drink. He's never going to make it big, Dad, I said quietly, and you're going to lose the house. I got in the car and drove away. I watched them in the rearview mirror, Mom crying, Dad kicking the tire of his SUV. I didn't feel happy, I felt hollow, but the chain was broken. The confrontation in the parking lot should have been the end of it. It should have been the moment they realized the gravity of their situation and started scrambling to save themselves. But denial is a powerful drug, and my parents were addicts. For the next week, they tried a different tactic, heavy artillery. I started getting messages from extended family. My Aunt Carol, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, sent me a Facebook message. Your mother is devastated. How can you be so cruel? Children care for their parents, Grace. It's God's law. My cousin Mike, who was best friends with Ryan, texted me, Yo, stop being a brat. Unfreeze the accounts. Ryan says you lock them out of their own money. That's illegal. It was a smear campaign. Ryan had spun the narrative. In his version, I was the vindictive sister who had stolen their passwords and access to hold them hostage. He was the hero trying to hold the family together while I threw a tantrum. I didn't respond to the flying monkeys. I dug deeper. I knew my parents were running out of liquid cash. I had left them $1,500. Between the mortgage attempt, groceries, and gas, that money had to be gone by now. Ryan certainly wasn't contributing. So, where were they getting money? I went back to the county clerk's website. I had a hunch. A sick, sinking hunch that came from years of seeing how fraudsters operate. Ted when their backs were against the wall. I searched for property records on my parents' address again. The page loaded slowly, the little wheel spinning, mocking my anxiety. There were the standard entries, the original deed from 1998. The refinance I had orchestrated for them in 2021 to lower their rate. And then a new entry. Dated October 24th, 3 days ago, document type HELOC Home Equity Line of Credit, lender Quick Cash Financial Services, amount $50,000. I stopped breathing. They had taken out a $50,000 line of credit against the house. In 3 days, that was fast. predatory lender fast. I clicked to view the scanned PDF of the document. I paid the $5 fee with shaking fingers. The document opened. I scrolled past the legalese, past the interest rate, a staggering 12%, down to the signature page. Borrower Alan last name signed. Borrower Brenda last name signed. And there, below their names, was a section for co-owner resident consent, required because my name was technically on the deed as a tenant in common, with a small percentage ownership. A legal safeguard I had insisted on when I paid for the roof renovation 2 years ago. Consent, Grace last name. There was a signature, it was loopy, it was slanted to the right. It looked nothing like my signature. I stared at the screen, the pixels burning into my retinas. Ryan had forged my signature. Or Dad had, or Mom. It didn't matter who held the pen. They had committed a felony. They had forged my name to borrow $50,000 against the house I had saved, likely to hand it straight to Ryan to cover his gambling debts or invest in his next failure. The betrayal shifted from emotional to criminal in the blink of an eye. I printed the document, then I printed it again. I spent the next 48 hours building the dossier. It was the most comprehensive work of my career. Exhibit A, the transcript of the parental laughter, my own testimony, but supported by the timeline of my departure. Exhibit B, the bank statements showing years of my payments covering their lifestyle. Exhibit C, the forensic trace of Ryan's gambling accounts and the Prestige Horizons ghost company. Exhibit D, the receipt for the diamond necklace bought with family funds. Exhibit E, the text messages from Aunt Carol and Cousin Mike proving the slander campaign. Exhibit F, the smoking gun, the HELOC document with the forged signature. I organized it all into a crisp, black binder. I wasn't just going to leave them anymore, I was going to stop them. I checked the date, November 5th. My parents' 35th wedding anniversary was this Sunday. They were hosting a large brunch at the local country club, a club they couldn't afford, likely paid for with the stolen HELOC money. The entire extended family would be there. Aunt Carol, Cousin Mike, the friends they tried to impress. It was the perfect stage. Ryan wanted to be the center of attention. He wanted to be the only child. I picked up my phone and called a number I had saved in my contacts, a colleague of mine who specialized in fraud litigation. "Hey, Sarah," I said when she answered. "I need a favor. I need a notary and a process server on standby for Sunday morning, and I need you to draft a partition suit for the sale of a property." "Who are we serving?" Sarah asked, hearing the steel in my voice. "My parents," I said, "and my brother." I looked at the binder on my desk. The tab on the side read, "The truth." "I'm crashing a party." The Oakwood Country Club was the kind of place my parents loved. It smelled of old money, lemon polish, and exclusion. They couldn't actually afford the membership, of course. They were there as guests of a member, playing the role of the successful, retired couple celebrating 35 years of marital bliss. I walked into the Crystal Room at 11:45 a.m. I was wearing a sharp, charcoal gray suit, my courtroom armor, and carrying the black binder tucked under my arm like a weapon. The room was filled with about 40 people. There were white linens on the tables, a 3-tiered cake in the corner, and a gentle hum of polite conversation. At the head table, Mom and Dad sat like royalty, clinking champagne flutes. Ryan was standing next to them, wearing a suit that was too shiny, looking every inch the entrepreneur he pretended to be. The air in the room shifted the moment I crossed the threshold. It wasn't a noise, it was a drop in pressure. Heads turned, smiles faltered. Aunt Carol was the first to intercept me. She bustled over in a floral dress that looked like aggressive upholstery, her face set in a scowl. "Grace," she hissed, blocking my path to the head table. "What are you doing here? Brenda said you weren't coming. She said you were having a mental health episode." "Is that what she said?" I asked, my voice carrying just enough to be heard by the nearby tables. "Did she mention the forgery, Carol, or did she leave tea?" hat part out of the diagnosis. Carol blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. What? You need to leave, you're upsetting the energy. The energy is about to get a lot worse, I said. I sidestepped her and continued walking. The room went silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. Dad stood up. He looked terrified. For a split second, I saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of a man who knows his house of cards is built in a wind tunnel. But then, he put on his mask. "Grace," he boomed, feigning a welcoming smile that didn't reach his eyes. We didn't think you'd make it. We were just about to make a toast." "I know," I said, reaching the head table. I placed the black binder down on the white tablecloth. The thud was heavy, final. I didn't want to miss the speech about the family legacy. Ryan stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Grace, seriously, don't cause a scene. This is Mom and Dad's day. Just sit down in the back or get out." I looked at my brother. I really looked at him. I saw the sweat on his upper lip. I saw the way his eyes darted to the binder. He knew. "I'm not here to cause a scene, Ryan," I said calmly, turning to face the room. "I'm here to clarify the financial report." I opened the binder. I pulled out a stack of stapled packets, copies of the dossier I had compiled. I handed the first one to Aunt Carol, who had followed me. I handed the second to Cousin Mike. I slid the third one across the table to Dad. "What is this?" Dad whispered, his hands trembling as he touched the paper. "Page 1, I announced, addressing the room like I was presenting to a board of directors. "A timeline of household expenses paid by me, Grace, over the last 10 years. Total value, $142,000. Murmurs rippled through the room. Mom turned pale. "Grace, stop it. This is private." "Page 3, I continued, ignoring her. "A copy of a credit card receipt for a $1,200 diamond necklace, purchased by Ryan using funds intended for the property tax." I pointed to a young woman sitting at table 4, Ryan's date. She was wearing the necklace. She froze, her hand going to her throat. "And finally," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious, "page 6. I picked up the copy of the HELOC document. "This is a loan document for $50,000 secured against my parents' home," I said. "It was signed last week. It requires the signature of all owners." I held up the paper. "This is my name. This is not my signature." The room was dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. "That's a felony," I said, looking directly at Dad. "Bank fraud, forgery, punishable by up to 10 years in prison." "It was a mistake," Ryan shouted, his voice cracking. He slammed his hand on the table. "It was a misunderstanding. I had verbal consent. Grace is just trying to sabotage my business launch because she's jealous. She's always been jealous." "The business," I turned to him, "Prestige Horizons." "Yes," Ryan yelled. "We're on the verge of a breakthrough. That 50 grand is a bridge loan. I'm going to triple it by next month." "Ryan," I said softly, "Prestige Horizons isn't a business. It's a username." I flipped to the back of the binder. "These are betting logs from the High Rollers Lounge. You didn't invest the money. You lost $15,000 on the Eagles game last Sunday. You lost another $10,000 on online poker on Tuesday." I looked at the crowd. There is no business. There is no investment. There is only a gambling addiction and a second mortgage with a 12% interest rate that is going to foreclose on my parents' house in 6 months. Mom let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She sank into her chair, covering her face with her hands. Dad stared at the papers. He looked from the gambling logs to Ryan. "The Eagles game," he whispered. "You told me you were buying inventory." "Dad, she faked these," Ryan pleaded, grabbing Dad's arm. "She's a computer genius. She made it all up." "I'm a forensic accountant," I corrected. "I don't fake records, I find them." I turned back to Dad. "I stood in the hallway and heard you wish I wasn't born," I said. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The guests gasped. Aunt Carol looked at Dad with horror. "You laughed. You said I was an obligation. You said you wanted to just be happy with Ryan. Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wouldn't give them that. Well, here is the reality of your happiness. I gestured to the papers, to the sweating brother, to the ruin on the table. You stole from the daughter who kept you safe to give to the son who sold you out. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I have the police on speed dial, I said. I can report the forgery right now. Ryan goes to jail. Maybe you do too, Dad, since you co-signed knowing I wasn't there. Dad looked up. He was crying. He looked old, broken, and terrified. Grace, please. Or, I said, we do it my way. Anything, Mom sobbed into her hands. Anything. The house goes on the market tomorrow. I listed my terms. The equity pays off the loan before the bank realizes it's fraud. You downsize. Ryan gets nothing, no money, no place to stay, and I walk away with my name cleared. I looked at Ryan. And if you ever come near my finances again, I will hand this file to the district attorney. I closed the binder. Happy anniversary, I said. I turned and walked out of the crystal room. Behind me, I heard the sound of a woman crying, and the angry, confused shouts of a family finally waking up from a long, expensive dream. The fallout was swift, brutal, and necessary. The party ended minutes after I left. According to Aunt Carol, who sent me a long, apologetic email 2 days later, Ryan tried to fight cousin Mike in the parking lot when Mike refused to lend him gas money. The police were called, but not by me. Ryan spent the night in the drunk tank, which was probably the safest place for him. The ultimatum held. My colleague, Sarah, drafted the paperwork the next morning. Dad signed the listing agreement for the house with a shaking hand. He didn't argue. He didn't try to negotiate. The fight had gone out of him the moment the truth hit the table. They sold the house quickly. The market was hot, and they were desperate. The proceeds paid off the predatory HELOC loan and the existing mortgage. After the debts were cleared, there was almost nothing left, certainly not enough for a retirement villa in Florida. They moved into a small, 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It was a walk-up. It didn't have a pool. It didn't have a landscaping crew. Ryan disappeared. Last I heard, he was in Nevada, working odd jobs, staying with friends until he wore out his welcome. Without the infinite line of credit that was my parents' blind love, he was forced to face the world on its terms, not his. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new office. I had been promoted. My boss had been impressed by my ruthless efficiency during a recent audit, a trait I had honed in the fires of my own living room. My receptionist buzzed me. Grace, your parents are here. They don't have an appointment. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the button. I could send them away. I could maintain the silence forever. Send them in, I said. They looked different, smaller. Mom was wearing a sweater from Target, not the boutique brands she used to favor. Dad walked with a cane he hadn't needed before. The stress of the move, the shame, and the loss of their golden child fantasy had aged them 10 years in 90 days. They sat in the chairs opposite my desk. They didn't look at the decor. They looked at their hands. We wanted to return this, Dad said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I opened it. It was my grandmother's brooch. I had left it behind in the rush, hidden in a drawer they usually never opened. We almost sold it, Mom admitted, her voice trembling. When the moving costs piled up, Ryan told us to sell it. But we couldn't, Dad said. He looked up at me, his eyes watery and red-rimmed. It was the only thing of yours we had left. I looked at the brooch. It was old, silver, and tarnished. We're sorry, Grace, Dad said. It wasn't the defensive apology of the parking lot. It was heavy with the weight of consequence. We were stupid. We were blind. We wished for Ryan to be the only one. And God, we were so wrong. You were the only one who ever actually cared about us. I know, I said. We don't expect you to help us, Mom said quietly. We miss you. We sit in that apartment and it's so quiet. We just wanted you to know that we see you now. We really see you. I looked at them. I saw the regret. I saw the fear of dying alone. I saw two people who had made a terrible gamble on a fantasy and lost everything real. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't hate. It was pity. "I forgive you," I said. They both exhaled, a sound of pure relief, and Mom started to cry. "Oh, Grace, thank you. Does that mean?" "I forgive you," I repeated, holding up a hand. "Because I refuse to carry the bitterness around like a stone. I forgive you for my sake, not yours." I slid a folder across the desk. It wasn't a dossier this time. It was a simple, color-coded budget. "I can't be your banker anymore," I said firmly. "And I won't be your emotional crutch. I'm not coming over for Sunday dinner to fix the Wi-Fi. I'm not paying the electric bill." I pointed to the folder. "But this is a budget for your pension income. If you follow it, you won't starve. You won't lose the apartment. It's the last bit of accounting I will ever do for you." Dad took the folder. He held it like it was a holy text. "Thank you, Grace." "You should go," I said, ending up, "I have work to do." They stood up. Mom hesitated, looking like she wanted to hug me, but she saw the wall I had built, a wall of glass, transparent but impenetrable. She nodded, gave a small wave, and walked out. Dad paused at the door. "You're a good woman, Grace, better than we deserved." "I know," I said again. The door clicked shut. I sat back in my chair. The office was quiet. The sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air.